Ken, thanks so much for coming on. As director of the Office of Foster Care and Adoption, when I reached out to you, I said what I wanted to do was to figure out how to get some children adopted and get them into foster homes. So I want to start with, how great is the need in the state of Connecticut? How many children do we have waiting right now, babies all the way up to however old, that need a forever home?
It's a great question, and we were thrilled when you would outreach and sent me the email, because there's a lot of unknowns about our system. When you look at the department, we have approximately 4,000 kids in out-of-home care right now.
Placed around the state.
Placed around the state. And now that includes placed with relatives, placed in foster homes, placed in congregate care facilities.
And that number has grown higher, is lower, stays about the same?
Interesting point is it's dramatically decreased over the past 2 years. When Commissioner Joette Katz took over the department in January of 2011, really she has shifted our mindset and caused systematic change, so we are looking at families differently, engaging them better, providing services in a much more timely manner, and therefore people and families are getting better. They're healing, they're rehabilitating, which then is preventing more children from coming into care. And actually, we've decreased the total number of kids in care over the past 2 years, upwards of 15 to 20%. So when she started, and the new administration started, we had about 4,700 kids in care. We now have around 4,000. Okay, so as the numbers of kids are decreasing, the types of children that are coming into care are the most vulnerable and oppressed that we've ever seen.
Give me examples.
Well, right now we know that we have a particular need for adolescent homes, individuals that take adolescents, medically complex children, sibling groups, and babies straight out of the hospital. These children that we see have lived traumatic backgrounds, cannot stay with mom. We've tried to access dad. He is not available. We have tried to access relatives to see if we could actually license relatives to care for them. And all of those immediate family members, for some fashion, have been deemed not appropriate for licensure, and therefore children have to come into what we call core foster home. We also have to understand about our system that the first thing that we look for, the first placement option we look for kids, is to place them with their relatives. We know that children, when they're removed from their homes, that is absolutely one of the most traumatic times in their lives. So what we try to do is access grandmother, aunts, ex-school teachers, their football coach, to say, can you step up for this child and work with us to provide a home for them while we quickly work to rehabilitate the family and provide them services? So that we now have over 30% of our kids placed into relative care, which is tremendous. That's almost 200% higher than 2 years ago. But the need for foster homes and the need for adoptive homes, I think now, is greater than ever, in particular for those groups that I mentioned, because those are our hardest kids to place. Think of an adolescent, right? We all did crazy things when we were adolescents. Our adolescents may be 13, 14, or 15. But Anne, in reality, emotionally, they're 5, 6, and 7. They need people who are going to hang with them.
Because they've been so traumatized.
Because they've been so traumatized, because they haven't had the parental figures to provide them love, nurturance, and guidance. They may be behind in school, and they may not have had those external experiences that are going to shape their core in a manner in which they can lead productive lives, unless we can find families to assist them.
That's a tall task. Where do you start? And hopefully this show will help.
Absolutely.
Where do you start to find these families that will be a permanent place for these kids that are so scarred?
We tend to find a lot of families who are referred by current foster and adoptive families, because what we've learned about our system is that I am neighbors with somebody who's licensed, I see what they do, I see the type of person they are, and I say, wow, I think that's something that I'm really interested in. We want people who love kids. We don't want you to worry about how much money you make, how big your house is, what you do for a living, whether you are single, divorced, married, same-sex couple. If you are a person of good character and you want to provide care for kids, we want you to look up our website, ctfosteradopt.com, or dial 1-888-KID-HERO, which is our line for prospective foster and adoptive parents to call. We have really, over the past couple years, broken down the licensing requirements to make them more family-friendly and easier for people to become licensed, because we realized there's a lot of myths about our department
Like
that
what?
just are wrong.
Like
Well,
what?
that you need your own house, that you have to make over a certain amount of money to be licensed, that you have to be married, that somebody has to be a stay-at-home parent. One of the greatest myths is
You're looking for love. You're looking for love for these kids.
hands down, we're looking for people that will accept children at whatever developmental, emotional, psychological stage or age that they are, love them like their own, help them strengthen, bond with them, help them pull through traumatic events, and work with us as a team with the department, with services, whether it's counseling or in-home services, according to that specific child's needs. And also to have families that are available to work with the children's birth families and families on a case-by-case basis, because we also know that children that see their foster and adoptive parents working with their mom and dad or their relatives really sends a beautiful message to that child that we are all here working on your behalf.
Give me an example of a child right now who's sitting in a shelter, who's maybe 12, who sees couples coming in and they didn't choose him or her. They're coming in, they didn't choose him or her, or you have a sibling situation. What does this do to a child who just never thinks they're going to be adopted?
The speed at which kids live their lives is dramatically quicker than adults, which is why a child's sense of time is so important to us, to find permanent homes quickly. You mentioned shelters for children. On the Foster Adopt website, we have a link to what we call the Heart Gallery. These are Connecticut's most difficult kids to place, who have given us permission to post their pictures and their beautiful stories in hopes of attracting
And
permanent.
they're heartbreaking. I've read some of them.
They are heartbreaking.
Heartbreaking.
And in the same sense, when you read them, our kids have strength upon strength upon strength. That's what I look at. That's what our adoptive families look at. They don't look at our children and say, okay, they can't do this, or they have trouble reading, or that, they're really not acting appropriately. The best adoptive families, the best foster families say, okay, you know what? Sometimes you lose your temper. Sometimes you don't want to go to school. Sometimes, for unexplained reasons, you sit down and cry. Sometimes, you know what, you're scared and you don't want to bond to an adult. Okay, but we are here with you. We're not going to give up on you. We are here to the full extent we can be to help you through this. So when you ask about a specific child, there are more than a few adolescents on our Heart Gallery that want a family. One of our children on the Heart Gallery, there's actually a video that she is presented in, and she talks about wanting to make a cake for her adoptive family someday, somebody that she's never even met, or sibling groups that will talk to our staff and say, whatever you do for us, we've got to be together. I mean, think about the power of being able to say to children, you know what, we want to provide you a permanent home, we're going to love you for the rest of your life, and we want all of you as siblings to come together.
There must not be trust right away, though. These kids may not, I would think, to get that trust, because they've been hurt so badly, must take a lot of work.
And we're going to work with you regarding what that child's behaviors are going to show in regards to when they trust and when they don't. Sometimes they're going to say, I don't want to listen to you. They're going to emotionally pull back. Child may have tantrums, may not want to talk to you at certain periods of time. And you're right. Why should our kids trust yet another adult when in fact they've been so traumatized by previous adults? Now, our best foster and adoptive parents don't let that scare them from stepping up and saying, you know what, together as a team, with the department, with fellow foster and adoptive parents, with community services, with the schools, all for this child, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it together, and we're all going to join in this show of strength. And every year, well over 500 children in state get adopted. We're a small state. 500 children get adopted. 300 plus children have their guardianship transferred to relatives. Every year we license 700 to 800 new foster and adoptive parents in the state.
You are working 24/7.
We have to.
Yeah.
You know why? Because the kids need us 24/7.
This is all leading up to something that I want to ask you. In the materials that you sent to me, you basically lay out your life story.
Yeah.
Tell me your experience growing up.
All right. I didn't have a normal experience in a good way. When I was in kindergarten, my mom and dad became licensed adoptive parents. And my family was licensed for specialized needs children. Children who had multiple placements.
Because why? What brought them to this?
That's a great question. And you know, we've talked about this as a family. I think both of my parents grew up in households where there were struggles. My parents raised all of us in a very religious household, and they are very devout Catholics and believe that it was their calling and their mission in life to adopt children.
So going back to kindergarten, what happened?
Well, even before they were married, they talked about adopting. So they had my older brother and myself, and in kindergarten, I remember talking to my parents, and they said, we're going to go to the hospital, and we're going to bring home a baby girl. And kind of the question was, well, how come? And mom and dad said, because she needs a home. So I remember telling my best friend in kindergarten, Sam Hart, I'm going home and I have a new sister. And from that point on, my family adopted 8 children. I'm second oldest of 11 kids. And I say my family adopted because it's not my parents, it was all of us. Siblings came when they were 18 months old, suffering from fetal alcohol syndrome and couldn't sit up straight, to 18 months after that, that same brother could dribble a basketball around the block. One of my sisters we believed was going to be deaf and has turned out to be just an amazing gymnast and a scholar athlete. Was it easy? No. Was it beautiful? Absolutely. Has it shaped who I am as a person? You know, people say to me, where would your siblings be without you? And I say, nope. Where would I be without them? So in my family, we range in age from 47 all the way down to 28. 2 sets of siblings were adopted, which is why really the real push for, you know,
so important to keep siblings together.
You know, Ann, one of my sisters, when she was first placed with us, her brother was placed into another home. Every night at the dinner table, she prayed that her younger brother could be placed with her. Think about your table. We just got through the holidays, right? Some kids go to college, some kids marry, you're sitting around the table. Everybody has an extra seat. Everybody could think about one child. 8, I give talks all the time. I say, don't think about 8, but you know what? Some of our foster parents still call me and say, I want to adopt more kids. I want to keep doing this. So the experiences that I had show me the power of a family. When one of us was having a bad day, we all had a bad day. When one of us had a gymnastics meet, we were all there. When one of us was scared that something was going to happen to them, it was all of us that said, you know what? We love you. You are safe here. We're going to make this work. Bedtime, the older kids were divided up between you give these 2 a bath, you give these 2 a bath. Who's helping out with homework?
You were called into action at a young age.
Young age. And you know what? I loved every minute of it.
Tell me about your 2 brothers.
You know, Ann, one of the
There were
pieces.
siblings that were adopted.
Sure. One of the pieces that I gave you was I have two brothers, Omar and Khalif, that I wrote an article about years ago. And the article is entitled "An Older Brother's Courage, a Younger Brother's Legacy." Omar and Khalif, I think, really exemplified what a family can do for children. Omar and Khalif lived a horrible life prior to coming to our family. They were in 26 different placements throughout the system. My brother Khalif was born, unfortunately, addicted to heroin and had suffered brain damage since birth. And he had a set of behaviors that at the time, child welfare officials 36 years ago didn't know what to do. So it was always Omar and Khalif placed together, and because of Khalif's behaviors, they disrupted. They went from home to home to home to home. I mean, shelter to shelter, you name it, they were placed. They wound up in a shelter in Chicago, where my family previously lived. And because of my family's licensing status, the agency called and said, we have a little boy that we think may be appropriate for you. So my parents started to visit, and they started to get to know Omar. Now, he was 6 years old at the time. Now, imagine you're in 26 different placements. You're in a shelter.
Right.
You're with your little brother, and his family's coming in, talking to you about adopting you. Nobody's mentioning Khalif. At one point, my brother Omar had enough courage to say, I have a little brother, and I want him to come with me too. Now, Ann, he's 6 years old. His little brother's 5. They lived a life of horrors, and my parents said to the shelter staff, what are you doing? You know what the shelter staff said? He's unadoptable. We don't think you should take him. My parents, who are loving, mild-mannered, looked him dead in the eye and said, listen, it's both boys or no boys. These are siblings. We're keeping them together. From that point on, we started pre-placements. From that point on, both brothers were placed into our home. And it wasn't easy, given the trauma that they experienced. You mentioned trust before. One of my siblings in a therapy session used to jump off of a couch into my mother's arms as a show of solidarity and trust that somebody will always be there for him.
Interesting.
Experts, psychiatrists, medical personnel told us not to adopt Khalif. They told us that he, in fact, would disrupt our family, was unadoptable, and was not the type of child that could ever be raised in a family. You know what? He lived a beautiful life. Came to us when he was 5, struggled with learning, had fabulous teachers. The community loved him. We coached him so he could be on our baseball team. He became on the International Special Olympics team. He was a high school wrestler and actually pinned a child. And when he was 18, he needed to be placed into a group home through the Department of Developmental Services because his needs at that point really outgrew what a family setting could handle. But the point I make in bringing that up is we knew all along our lives that certain service providers came in and certain service providers came out. And if that's what our siblings needed, then that's what happened. The premise of the article is to really celebrate his life. Khalif died in 2006, suffered a heart attack. And when you look at his life, he's the kid that nobody said could make it in a family. Those are kids on the website that don't feel they can ever be a part of a family. We have kids in this state that go to bed every night and wonder, when am I going to meet my forever parent? We've got to do something. And you know what? You mentioned, working 24/7. That's sometimes not even enough. Our system is better now. I think we support our foster and adoptive parents in ways we never have. We have in-home services. We have services in the community. We have individuals that will come into your home and work with you regarding the child. We have eased up on our confidentiality laws so you can know so much more about this child. Our staff, I think, are smarter and much better equipped to explain to you what you need to know to take this child into your home. And we really need families, again, single, 2-parent, retired, who love kids, to contact us.
You tell a beautiful story. Somebody listening to this right now how do they get into the system and how do they get going with a child?
Sure. First thing you want to do is you want to dial 1-888-KID-HERO. We have operators and social workers on those phones that will take in your information, answer any of your questions, and kind of walk you through what the next steps are. So once you contact us, then we recontact you and we say, okay, we'd like you to come to an open house with the department. You come, you hear about the work, you hear about the services, you hear about the kids. From that point on, we schedule a personal interview with you. We get to know you, your family, your background, your interests. Then we have you go through what we call our pre-licensing training, where you learn about the system, what we're all about.
And how long a time period is this?
Well, I would say from the phone call to full licensure, it can be anywhere from 4 to 5 months. Connecticut has well-versed licensing regulations, which are all good to make sure that parents are prepared and the right people are coming forward. So once you go through that training, we will do then a home study on you to understand you and your background. And while all this is going on, we're getting from you the type of child that you think you would do best with, while constantly reminding you and working with you that we absolutely today need families for adolescents, sibling groups, medically complex children, and babies for foster care straight out of the hospital. And so then when all of that's completed, we know your information, we know who you are, the staff do, and be prepared, because once you're licensed, when you least expect it, that phone is ringing. The story I tell all the time to groups is when we were in Chicago, my older brother, JR, was in college. He had a 12-hour drive home. He calls my mom and says, I'm leaving now, what's new? She says, nothing. He's driving. He calls 6 hours later. Hey, I stopped for gas, everything okay, what's new? Oh yeah, nothing's new. He gets home 6 hours later, so 12-hour drive. We're all eating dinner. He eats dinner, we all do our thing, there's all these kids in the house, and about 9 o'clock, he realizes there's this little girl that's sitting there. And he says, when is she going home? And Mom says, I forgot to tell you, since the last time you called, the state called, they needed help.
Here she is.
Here she is.
Ken, thank you for being an advocate and finding forever homes for children all over the state.
Thank you for having us. Make that
Appreciate it.
call.